Imagine stepping into an ancient temple, thousands of miles and thousands of years away from anything you know, and seeing a symbol you just saw on the other side of the planet, not a random doodle, but a specific, complex figure that perfectly matches a motif from a completely separate civilization. These aren't isolated incidents. Across our world's most mysterious sites, from the Andes to the deserts of Egypt and the ruins of Turkey, history is riddled with impossible echoes. They suggest a lost blueprint, a shared memory, or perhaps a forgotten, highly advanced era of human civilization. We're going to dive into the evidence that historians often dismiss as mere coincidence. Main content: 10 ancient mysteries that defy logic. Let's start with the classic pyramid. When you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, what you see is a mountain of limestone designed not just as a tomb, but as a resurrection machine, perfectly aligned with true north with an accuracy that still baffles modern engineers. It's over 99.9% accurate. Blink. You're transported 7,000 miles across the Atlantic to the jungles of Central America. A different continent, a different time period. Q. You look up and see the exact same geometrical silhouette. The Mayan and Aztec pyramids. Q. Different people, different languages, and separated by millennia. Yet, they are building the exact same resurrection machine. The similarities aren't just in the shape a pile of rocks naturally forms a pyramid. That's simple physics. It's in the intent and the precision. Both cultures aligned these massive structures with surgical precision to the cardinal points and specific constellations, often Orion or the Pleiades. For mainstream history, this is convergent evolution, humans needing to build wide bases, and they map the same stars. But when you consider the complex astronomical and mathematical feats achieved on two separate continents, the coincidence feels a little too convenient for the spiritual coincidences. I want you to imagine standing before a wall that defies gravity. Okay. It's not made of standard brick, but of massive, irregular, polygonal stones, some the size of small houses, locked together so tightly you couldn't slide a piece of paper between the joints. Oh no. There is no mortar, no glue, just massive, irregular polygons interlocked in 3 dimensions. These walls have survived earthquakes that leveled modern concrete buildings. You're in Peru, at the fortress of Sacsayhuamán, where the Inca moved limestone blocks weighing up to 200 tons. But wait, are you in Peru? Or are you in Baalbek, Lebanon, where you find the trilithon stones weighing 800 tons raised 20 feet into the air? Or perhaps you're at the Valley Temple in Egypt, where the granite blocks are fitted with the same complex, mortar-free polygonal style found in the Andes. The engineering challenge here is simply staggering. Moving an 800-ton stone today requires specialized hydraulic cranes that take weeks to assemble. The ancients did this without the wheel, without iron tools, and without modern mathematics. The common archaeological explanation is unlimited manpower and centuries of time. Pounding stone on stone is slow, but it works, and the polygonal shape is excellent for earthquake resistance. But manpower doesn't explain the methodology. If these cultures never met, why did they all decide to solve the problem of heavy lifting in the exact same impossible way? complete with the puffy face stones and metal clamps used to hold them internally. Take a walk through any museum of ancient art, and you'll notice a strange, recurring accessory. A figure carved into a pillar in Turkey 12,000 years ago at Göbekli Tepe. A relief of a winged genie in ancient Assyria. Massive stone monument from the Olmecs in Mexico. They are all gods or powerful beings, and they are all holding the exact same accessory. A small, square-bottomed, arched-handled bag. It looks for all the world like a designer purse, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. At Göbekli Tepe, the oldest temple on Earth, Pillar 43 clearly depicts 3 of these bags sitting along the top row. Fast forward thousands of years to Mesopotamia, and the Apkallu, the 7 sages, are carved holding a pine cone in one hand and this square-bottomed bag in the other. Cross the Atlantic to the La Venta site in Mexico, and you find the Olmec Monument 19 depicting a figure holding the identical object. Even the Mbori of New Zealand have myths involving baskets of knowledge brought down from the heavens. The shape is consistent, a flat bottom, a curved handle top, held casually by the most powerful entities in the pantheon. Historians suggest these are Sichila ritual buckets for carrying holy water or seeds, symbolizing fertility and agriculture. It's a container, the most basic human tool. But the uniformity is haunting. If it's just a bucket, why does every god hold it like a badge of office? It looks less like a basket of seeds and more like a piece of secret technology of the ancients they did unwant to leave behind. Close your eyes and picture the end of the world. Not a nuclear war or a plague, but water. A wall of water so high it swallows the mountains. A storm that drowns the cries of humanity, leaving only silence and a vast, flat ocean. This is the oldest nightmare of our species. The terrifying part isn't that it's a story we tell. It's that every single one of our ancestors, no matter where they lived, told the exact same story. We all know Noah and his ark from the Hebrew Bible, but centuries before Genesis was written, the Sumerians wrote the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a man named Utnapishtim is warned by a god to build a giant boat to escape a flood sent to destroy mankind. In India, the Matsya Purana tells of Manu, the first man, who is warned by a fish to build a ship to survive a deluge. The Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Inca all had flood legends involving a select few survivors. The Gunyu myth in China describes a great flood that lasted for 2 generations. The indigenous tribes of North America, the Aboriginal Australians, and the Vikings all have their own version. The details sending out birds to find land. The boat resting on a mountain, Pakar, suspiciously consistent across isolated continents. Historians suggest these are local floods. But if these were local floods, why is the narrative arc identical? It suggests that at one point, humanity wasn't scattered. We were all standing together, watching the water rise. This incredible global consistency is why this topic often makes the list of 10 ancient mysteries science coup unexplained. We are hardwired to modify our bodies. We get tattoos. We pierce our ears. We lift weights. But imagine looking at your newborn child and deciding that their head is the wrong shape. Imagine binding their skull with wooden boards and tight cloth day after day, year after year, forcing the bone to grow upward into an elongated cone. This wasn't torture. It was the ultimate status symbol. The question is, who were they trying to look like? This phenomenon of artificial cranial deformation is global but unconnected. The most famous examples come from the Paracas culture on the coast of Peru, dating back 3,000 years. Their skulls are incredibly elongated, some with cranial volumes larger than the average modern human. But they weren't the only ones. The Huns who swept across Europe practiced this. The Chinook tribes of North America did it. The Mangbutu people of the Congo did it. Ancient Egyptian depictions of Akhenaten and his family show similarly distended skulls. We are talking about diverse cultures separated by vast oceans and unrelated languages, all deciding that the elite human form, the shape of royalty and divinity, was a long, cylindrical head. It is a painful, dangerous, and long-term process that requires total cultural commitment. Why that specific shape? Why did kings and queens across the globe conclude that to look like a god, you had to look like that? In the animal kingdom, the snake is the enemy. It is venomous, silent, and deadly. Primates are evolutionarily programmed to fear it. Yet, if you look at the pantheons of the ancient world, the serpent isn't a villain. It is the supreme teacher, the bringer of civilization. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent Quetzal, Coatl to the Aztecs. Kukulkan to the Mayans was the deity who brought wind, rain, and knowledge to humanity. In ancient Egypt, the Urius cobra sat on the brow of the pharaoh, symbolizing divine authority and the goddess Wa-Jet. In India, the Nagas are semi-divine serpent beings that guard treasure and knowledge. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent is the one who offers the fruit of the tree of knowledge. The symbol of medicine we use today, the rod of Asclepius, is a snake wrapped around a staff. The recurrence of the flying serpent or feathered serpent is particularly odd. Snakes don't fly. So, what exactly were our ancestors looking at in the sky or on Earth that they described as a dragon or a flying snake? Even more startling, in ancient China, Nuwa and Fuxi, the creators of mankind, are depicted with human upper bodies and intertwined serpent tails, nearly identical to the structure of DNA. The symbol of a potent metaphor is understandable, but the specific, consistent recurrence of the serpent as a bringer of knowledge across disconnected cultures, why? Take a walk through the Vatican, and you'll see statues of saints, crucifixes, and a giant bronze pine cone, 4 meters high. It's the largest pine cone statue in the world. It seems like a random choice of decor for the seat of Christendom. But then you look at the staff of the Egyptian god Osiris, there's a pino cone on top. You look at the carvings of the Sumerian gods, they are holding pine cones. Why is this humble seed pod the secret handshake of the ancient elite? The pino cone is a recurring symbol in art history because it is a biological link. It is an ancient symbol of human enlightenment because it represents the pineal gland, a tiny pinocone-shaped organ in the center of our human brain. The ancients called it the third eye. The French philosopher Descartes called it the seat of the soul. The link here is biological and deeply esoteric. The Greek god Dionysus carried a staff topped with a pine cone. Hindu deities are often depicted with a pine cone-like hairstyle or holding similar objects. Skeptics argue it's just a simple symbol of regeneration. Pine trees are evergreens. The cone holds seeds. It represents life. But how did ancient cultures, without microscopes or modern anatomy, know that there was a tiny gland in the center of our brain that looked exactly like a pine cone, and that this gland was linked to our perception of light and consciousness? I need you to erase the last 80 years of history from your mind. Forget the Nazis. Forget the hate. If you go back 3,000 years, the swastika was not a symbol of evil. It was the most positive, universal symbol of good fortune on the planet. You could walk from Greece to India to Arizona, and you would see this spinning cross carved into temples, woven into baskets, and painted on shields. The word swastika comes from Sanskrit, meaning conducive to well-being. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it has been a sacred symbol for millennia, representing the eternal cycle of birth and rebirth. But it's not just Asian. We find the swastika on ancient Greek pottery from 700 BC. We find it in the mosaic floors of ancient Roman villas. We find it in the whirling logs, symbol of the Navajo people in North America. We find it on Celtic artifacts and even on artifacts from the Bronze Age in Europe. Geometrists will tell you it's a simple pattern, a cross with moving arms, easy to draw. But the fact that it always means good luck, life, or the sun suggests it's not just a doodle. It's a shared memory of a celestial clock that everyone was watching. It appears in cultures that had no contact with the Vedic traditions of India, yet they use the exact same geometric logic. Imagine you have a bad migraine. The doctor tells you the only way to let the demons out is to take a sharp stone and scrape a hole in your skull until he exposes your brain. You are awake for this, and the craziest part, you survive. This sounds like a horror movie, but for thousands of years, this was the cutting edge of medical science. This is trepanation, the oldest surgical procedure in the world. We have found trepan skulls in Neolithic France dating back to 6,500 BC. We find them in ancient Greece. The practice reached its zenith in Peru, where archaeologists have found hundreds of skulls with perfectly healed surgical holes. The survival rate in the Inca Empire was shockingly high, up to 80% to 90% in later periods. The bone regrowth proves these patients lived for years after the surgery. We find similar skulls in Russia, China, and North Africa. These cultures used different tools: obsidian, flint, bronze, but the procedure and the anatomical knowledge required to avoid killing the patient were identical. It suggests a medical manual that was shared, then lost. A stance of power. Once you recognize it, you will see it everywhere. A figure standing front and center, knees slightly bent, elbows out, and in each hand clutched tight, a staff or a serpent. It is the posture of the master of animals. It is the icon of the one who controls the chaos. This motif dominates the Chavin and Wari cultures in the Andes. The most famous example is Viracocha, carved into the Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. He stands frontally, holding two staffs, surrounded by winged figures. Traveled 12,000 years back in time to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. On Pillar 56, we see a nearly identical figure, squatting, frontal, holding a staff-like object in each hand. We see echoes of this in the Master of Animals motif in ancient Mesopotamia and Greece. The composition is rigid and specific. It is not a casual drawing. It is a specific iconographic blueprint that survived the end of the Ice Age and reappeared on the other side of the world. Art historians call this symmetrical figures look powerful and stable. But the staff god isn't just a design. Feels like a portrait of a figure so influential that 12,000 years later, we are still carving his statue, even if we've forgotten his name. Most people walk through a museum, look at these artifacts, and see nothing but dusty rocks. They accept the textbook coincidence and move on. But you watched this far, which means your mind is wired to see the glitches in the matrix. You don't just consume content. You analyze evidence. You understand that history is a puzzle, and you suspect we're missing the box with the picture on it. The undeniable parallels between the pyramids, the universal handbag, the staff god, and the shocking consistency of medical and astronomical knowledge across disconnected civilizations force us to ask, what knowledge did our ancestors share that was wiped from the map? The Sleeping Historian is the headquarters for the people who refuse to stop asking why. I want to see that mind at work. If you're ready to continue the excavation, make your membership official. Hit like and subscribe to The Sleeping Historian and lock in your access to the archive.